Let's see. All right, I'm going to share my screen. All right, let's go ahead and just quickly review kind of our main goal today. So I want you to be able to leave this discussion with essentially a great outline, if not the majority of your paper complete. If I were you, I would have a notebook out, maybe even Google Docs, and as we're talking tonight, you should be able to get the majority of these things complete. Our discussion, I've already outlined it with all the themes that are present. We're going to talk about some child welfare issues that we also saw, and then that responsibility of the abuse and neglect. And so again, like if you're following along tonight and participating in the discussion, taking notes, essentially like this is created to write the paper in today's session. So just again, tying back into anything that's been relevant that we've learned about so far this year, and then reflecting it on how it could inform your work with child welfare, whether you're working with children or not at this moment. You won't have to do a cover page or references needed. This is APA. So really what I mean, the main staple of APA is Times New Roman, 12-point font, double spaced, 1-inch margins. And again, in that previous module of that first assessment, I did go ahead and post multiple links to different websites that would help you with APA sourcing. My goal for tomorrow is to have all of the room reflection papers submitted and graded tomorrow. And so that way, if there's any additional comments on the previous paper that could reflect on bettering your grade for this one that's due this week, you should have those comments by end of day tomorrow. Just because I want to make sure, I don't think it would be fair for you to submit a similar assignment if you haven't yet received your grade from the previous one. So I'll have that done by the end of day tomorrow. I'm going to stop tab. And then before I move on, is there any questions over the reflection assessment for educated? Okay, cool. Let me just really quickly, because we have not talked about this yet, and I just want to make you aware of this. So this is the final paper. Um, we'll circle back to the syllabus just so I can make sure I'm saying the correct date. I have one off the top of my head, but I don't want to tell you wrong. This is 50 points, so this is like your culminating research paper based off of the class. So this is APA. This is the whole shebang here with the title page, the reference page. And again, I will re-upload those APA resources that I put during the first assessment and assignment. I'll re-upload those just so you can use those again to your benefit. So this is going to include 6 to 8 peer-reviewed journal articles or sources. Like, as long as it's a reliable source, I'm happy with it. This paper should be 6 to 8 pages, and then using this rubric as a guideline for writing. So essentially what your plan here is, I want you to pick an issue in child welfare. Now, this could be a specific community issue. This could be a global issue. A lot of our previous assignments were looking at child welfare system on a micro level, so small individual things. And we spent a lot of time over this semester thinking about different populations of children, the different traumas or experiences they've had and how we should handle that. But this paper should be more of a macro perspective. So looking at why children become involved in the welfare system, current ways the system works to help children, gaps in services, public policy, including information about the US as a whole, discuss how macro level issues affect individuals on the micro level, critique that issue of your choice, the description of how this topic affects children, your opinion on how we could fix the issue, and ideas of future problems that could arise. The nice thing about this paper, and specifically with that A through J, it's really setting you up for exactly what you need to write to A, get full credit, but B, be able to hit that page limit. Just obviously that is a significant amount of information. And so if you're tackling your issue and hitting each of those things, you're going to be really successful on creating a page that's a paper that's very thorough, and also that you're going to receive the majority, if not all, the points. You're integrating your knowledge of trauma-informed practice and everything that we've learned. This is, again, your culminating project. Just some global kind of big ideas. So you could talk about human trafficking, foster care, or adoption in the United States or out of the United States. You could talk about education in the United States, poverty, media, social media, violence, parents and family structure. It's really like those big topic ideas. If there was a topic that we talked about in one of the weekly lectures this semester that you think you could talk about on a larger scale, or that you could have a significant amount of information to continue that discussion, and if you are kind of questioning it, feel free to shoot me an email and I can let you know if that would be a good choice or not. Most likely, I'm going to say it would be a good choice. If you're interested in it, you're going to be able to write a better paper. So it's encouraged us to be creative with this. You may not be able to find research that directly correlates with your topic, but instead think about how you can blend the information that you have found and that you know, and be critical in your thinking process to be able to answer those questions. So this is really your rubric and your thought process for that. Again, that's the culminating assignment. I'm going to quickly just go over to the syllabus just so I can definitely make sure that we are all on the same page for what day that is due. So next week is Thanksgiving break, and then the assessment, the final assessment paper, the research paper, is going to be due on the December 5th. It's the second to last week, so week 16. Additionally, also in week 16, I'll go ahead and post a final study guide for the finals exam as well. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And are there any questions over the last two assignments? I know specifically, I mean, I'm really glad that you all are here and that you could hear that like live description of it, just because it is a larger assignment. Does anyone have any questions or anything I could clarify on the culminating research project? Cool. Yeah, and it's totally fine if you don't have any questions. That's awesome. I will say, like, it's very interesting to me, like this semester specifically. I've had a lot of people email me about information that is in each weekly module, asking things for clarification on like what an assignment should be. And typically I've always have that in that module. And so if you are confused about that, that was posted in this week's module. And it'll be posted obviously in week 16 as well. So you can go back to find that information. Okay, with that being said, we're going to go ahead now and transition into the discussion over the text educated. I would love it if you have your cameras on. I'm obviously not going to force you to do that. I really don't care, like, if you're chilling in bed, like that's totally fine. I'm happy that you're here. And again, like this really is only going to be beneficial for you if you guys are having the discussion. My role tonight is the moderator. I'm here to provide the questions and provide the topics, and your role is to discuss and talk about your ideas and what you learned about in the book. My job tonight is not to do a recap of the entire book. The job is to give you those big ideas, look at the thematic elements, and help you kind of create the outline for your paper. So the more that you participate, the more information that you will be able to glean. So if you are comfortable and you could turn your cameras on, that would be awesome. I'm going to go ahead now and start sharing the PowerPoint that I've created just for our discussion. And please feel free, like, again, this is mainly your discussion. I'm just moderating. And so please feel free just to speak up whenever. Actually, I'm interested here. As I'm looking at the PowerPoint, I am not able to see you all. So if it actually will work better if what I'll do is I'll probably just read the slide and then I'll go back just to view, just so I can see who's speaking. So our educated discussion tonight, kind of our topic for what we're going to talk about, and the four major things, or some of the major things that we're going to discuss. One, I want us to be able to create an understanding of the major topics in the book. We're going to start with just our general thoughts. So just like we've done in the discussion posts every week, I'm interested to hear your general thoughts on this book. I read this book for the first time last year. And it wasn't like an instant 5-star read for me. It was amazing. I'm not a huge nonfiction reader, and this one was, it almost reads like a fiction book because it's so wild. We're going to talk about the different types of neglect that are present in this book and reflect back on how we've learned about that throughout the semester. We're also going to look at how does our memory affect our narrative and our understanding of what's happening. And then something that we haven't really touched on this semester, but how religious trauma can affect child welfare as well. So the first topic that we're going to just kind of take a look at is just general thoughts. So I'd love to hear some of your general thoughts, chapters that shocked you, surprised you, maybe just things that you kind of thought were unbelievable, because there are definitely many things in this book that seem very unbelievable. Um, and so if there's anybody that has a specific chapter in mind that you would like to kind of start the chat, like the discussion off about that you were really surprised about, I think that would be a great way to start our discussion. Um, and again, like you can really just kind of go off of mute and kind of start here. Yeah, and again, the more you participate, the more that you guys will be able to take out of it, and essentially like you're helping each other create this assignment. So if anyone would like to go ahead and break the ice and get us started here with a chapter that surprised them, shocked them, or just was overwhelming.
For me, I think the first chapter that really like emphasized how I don't know how to explain like severe I guess their ideas were. I don't know what specific chapter it was, but it was when they got into the first car crash
Mm,
and like people were in like especially the mother, like she was severely hurt and they like refused to go to the hospital, and it just showed like really how deep into their beliefs they were. Like I thought like someone was gonna die in that chapter, and
yeah.
like and it kind of just was brushed off after a while. Like after a few chapters it was like it never really happened.
I I kind of had that same thought throughout the entirety of the book. I'm like, is someone gonna die this chapter, and who will it be? Because we're doing is putting essential oils on them.
Right.
Like, how are we gonna handle this? Olivia, would
Yeah.
you like to add something?
Yeah, I also had the same thoughts about how I always thought someone was gonna die because like when the dad got really severely burned, I was shocked he didn't die because he lived on and all they did was like put the salves on him and stuff and it was like, oh.
Yes, that I 100%, the most one of the most shocking chapters is the car crash chapter. Essentially, almost everyone in the vehicle is hurt. They seek zero medical attention whatsoever. And it's all about the herbal remedies of the mother. I definitely, yeah, that is always one that comes up right away. What about other chapters or maybe characters that people, well, it's not even right to say characters because these are all real people, or maybe other people in Tara's family that really stuck out to you.
Her brother who handed her the knife, and I don't know, it was just awful. I really didn't like him.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, I agree. I like Sean. I thought he was nice to her until he wasn't, and then that behavior just kept repeating. And I just found it insane how like long, and it kind of got annoying because it kept happening and no one was doing anything about it. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like, mhm.
Yeah, it was like the more awful things that happened to their family, the more stubborn they became. And that was also, yeah, infuriating. And I don't know, just even all the way up to the end when they went and visited her at Harvard. But, it was just, let's exercise you. Just, oh my gosh.
I
Yeah.
think infuriating is a really great word to honestly like cover this entire book. Especially as I would assume most of us went to school. I would assume most of us probably sought medical attention when we had like threatening emergencies. And so when we're listening to this poor girl's real life story where obviously there's so much neglect and trauma that's built up throughout her life, it is absolutely infuriating. And to think about like all the times that she could have received help or she was so close to a better situation and then it just didn't happen. 100%. I would definitely say that was infuriating. Did anyone else want to comment on Sean or the dad? I know that those are both very upsetting characters.
Wanted to add on. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I wanted to add on just with Sean. I definitely thought he was like a bully to his sister, especially because when you think of older brothers, you would think they should be protective to their younger siblings, and he was really just a bully.
Yeah, absolutely. He was definitely a bully. And maybe it started off as bullying, but I definitely think it probably quickly elevated to a really significant level of abuse. Mackenzie, did you want to add something?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Going off of Tara's dad, I think it was really like interesting to see how like hellbound he was on like the Illuminati and just the outside world and everything, and just him as a person. I almost wonder like what did his childhood and upbringing look like to like cause him to be that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Typically, when people are so severely on one thinking pattern, it's probably very cyclical, meaning that they grew up in a household that looked the exact same way, and that's all that they knew. Definitely, that's going to be a one of the topics that we touch on, is how we can break those cycles and how we can look at that. Any other just kind of general thoughts before we get into some of the more specific discussion questions?
Like, for me, Tara herself stood out the most just because, like, she kept pushing through everything. Because I don't know how I would have, like, if I was in her shoes, I don't know how I would have kept going and, like, kept pushing for my goals. And that just really shocked me. I was reading about that.
100%. Yeah, I was explaining to one of my coworkers today about this book, and just about a few of the very, very traumatic things that she goes through. And then the fact that she's able to establish herself so well academically and professionally and go on and lead a healthy life is astounding. I know there's so many things that happen in this book that I think without a really significant amount of resiliency, a lot of people or most people probably wouldn't make it through. All right. Can you still see my slideshow right now? Or are we like, yes? Okay, perfect. So, we're gonna just kind of lean in specifically to looking at neglect. I would highly recommend this could be a really big point that you talk about in your reflection paper this week, just because obviously there's a significant amount of neglect that's described and depicted in this book. We have educational neglect, medical neglect, physical, and emotional. And I kind of want to spend the first chunk of this slide specifically thinking about educational neglect, just because obviously, like in America, we have to go to school. It is against the law not to go to school. But how does Tara's family get around these things? What is their view on school? And what kind of schooling do Tara and her brothers receive? So I'll kind of let's open that up and kind of discuss educational neglect for just a few minutes, and then we'll kind of work through. And again, this is a great topic to take notes on because essentially, like this could be the cornerstone of your paper.
At least from what I remember, her parents weren't very good at being able to answer any of their questions. Like they were just self-taught,
Mhm.
from what I remember at least.
Yeah, that's correct. What was their view on traditional education and why do you think it was? And that can be anyone.
That you're feeding into the system, like the whole Illuminati and all of that stuff is running everything, don't feed into it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I also agree. And I also found it interesting how her dad was against her going to college, but then when she did go, he was kind of like saying, "Oh, it's like God's plan and stuff," and like kind of like flipping it around that, oh, she was kind of like doing it in order to also disprove like all the like Illuminati stuff and whatnot.
Yes, and then they wanted to take credit for it, which
Yeah.
was like for me personally, it kind of infuriates me because I know, like people who have gone through similar situations and fought to educate themselves, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and
my wife. It's my wife that I'm talking about.
yeah, and it really annoyed me when this is later in the book when she was already in Cambridge and she came back and I think it was when her mom yelled at her dad or something and he was like making his own breakfast and then he sees her and he's like, "Oh, it's like the kitchen, you're a woman, you should go in there." And it's like also like her just like making the breakfast. He said like that it only took us sending you to Cambridge for you to like be back where you're meant to be. And I was like, they didn't do anything to send her to Cambridge. Yeah.
Exactly. I totally agree with that.
I think like their education like started off with kind of it was a very like biased perspective because the only way they really got an education was through like the Bible. So everything like Tara like learned to read from the Bible and like all of her teachings were strictly from the Bible. Like she didn't know like any like history besides that. Like she didn't know what the Holocaust was and everything. So I think it kind of stunted her like maturity and like her growth as a person because she basically came into college like without the background of even like middle school history or any
Mhm.
world events.
And I think like being able to push through that, like showing up into an educational space and having a realization very quickly that you lack a significant background in any content related, and then to be able to push through that and continue pursuing your academic goals, that takes a lot. That takes a lot because those are the realizations that we have in elementary school and in late elementary school as humans, like, oh, that's something I don't know. Like I can make the choice to either like learn it or just not learn it and like be the kid that doesn't know it. And 99% of the time we choose to say like, okay, let's learn the new thing. But to not have the option or not to know that you haven't learned the new thing until you're 20 years old in a large group setting that's significantly higher pressure. That's a lot. And that's a big deal for her to be able to push through that. That's a great comment to bring up.
Yeah, and also to add upon that, like her worldview was so narrow because of how she was raised. She
Mhm.
was opposed to wanting to get help, like the grants. She
Yeah.
was debating going back to work for her father and, subjecting all of that or just accepting money that was rightfully there from a society that she was taught to hate.
Yeah, and she even wanted to like send the money that she didn't need back for the grants, which was like kind of insane because I'm glad she did
Yeah.
end up taking it because she needed it for like the future anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, it was hard for me at some points, actually like a lot of points of the book, like I found myself getting frustrated with her, which like isn't like it's like obviously like when you look at like the whole scheme of things, it's not her fault that she felt that way about things. Like she was raised and like essentially brainwashed to think a certain way, but like at some points it was like really frustrating because like all she needed to do was like accept the help that people were offering her and it would have made things a lot easier, but she like was so stubborn. And it really took until like even like while she was getting her PhD to kind of like finally like break from like that hold her family had on her.
I know as a reader, every time she would go home for a holiday or a break, like you hold your breath. You're like, what horrible traumatic event is going to occur now that she's home for a few weeks? Or is she going to get sucked back up into the issues with Sean and her father? It was a roller coaster for sure. We can go ahead and look at medical and physical neglect now. I know we've already touched a little bit on the car accident chapter, but I would say that this category specifically really connects with not just Tara, but also her siblings. And so just any instances that you felt maybe were overwhelming with medical or just like your physical needs in specifically looking in the category of neglect throughout the book.
This isn't
I
like
thought,
medical. Oh,
sorry.
sorry. This isn't like medical neglect in terms of like their physical health, but I think they didn't have like medical records at all, or like half of them didn't have birth certificates. And even though like you don't need that to survive, like in their family, like it kind of prevents them from going out into the world and then building the rest of their lives. So I found that to be really just shocking that like the government didn't even know about them and then they really didn't have a way to get help from the medical system. Like they were cut off.
Absolutely.
I found it interesting when she ended up with strep and mono, that when she told her mom she had like taken antibiotics, that her mom tried to send her back like remedies to help flush her body of all of the antibiotics.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
especially
that was
that.
actually shocking.
Mhm.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes.
Oh yeah. It was like the fact that she didn't even send remedies for the strep or the mono just to like flush the antibiotics was crazy to me.
I thought it was really crazy when the dad got that like burnt really severely and he basically
Mhm.
said like, well, Luke getting burnt was like he said something about how it was like a sign from God and like so then they knew how to properly like help him when he got burnt. And I just think that's like a crazy way to twist it, especially because like he easily could have died. So like saying it was like God's will that he ended up that way is like instead of just going to the hospital where his burns could have been treated a lot better is like a very skewed way of looking at it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think that it's crazy that almost everything that happened, they just said it was like God's will, even though like it's like really didn't have to be God's will. Like, God probably didn't exactly want him to be burnt or like make that a sign for them or anything.
Yeah, when like the part that stuck out to me was when that Tara said that they were like chosen by God to get like all these injuries and that they were special because of it and God wanted that to happen to them.
Yeah, and it's so much easier, right, for her parents to not have to be accountable
Mhm.
when you just cast all of that onto God, you know, and that's a form of emotional and mental abuse that surpasses so much. Well, yeah, spiritual for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the slides, and we can kind of just, it seems like we're naturally kind of leading into this discussion now. We haven't spent any time this semester looking at religious trauma. And it's actually as the course moves forward next year, I'm looking to add a segment on that. Obviously, I definitely think that a lot of adults have experienced religious trauma. Whether if you haven't, you probably know someone that has. And speaking from like a firsthand perspective of this, it can really change your view on lots of different people and their belief systems. And it can really alter your perspective on things. Because that's belief is such a core human value. And especially if that's all that's poured into you as a child, it can be really, really meaningful or also really, really hurtful. And so obviously they use religion as a weapon in this book and they weaponize it to approve of their lifestyle and to disapprove that's anything that's of anything that would be different or that would stray from that. Um, would anyone else like to kind of continue this conversation or just discuss maybe about the family's religious beliefs? And you can continue kind of on our same discussion of things that were infuriating or just simply ridiculous, or potentially how their religious beliefs continued into that neglect or pushed forward into possible child welfare issues.
I kind of just wanted to like it kind of ties to the religious portion, but also the medical is like
Yeah.
they're very cut off from the medical world. And so it was kind of like her dad forces the mom to become a midwife despite like, oh, I don't want to really be a
Mhm.
midwife. And he's like, no, you have to. Like it's God's plan for you. You like really need to do this. And it was kind of like they're cut off and they made this sort of like kind of a bridge where the mom is forced to be the only like medical expertise that they have and like they all need to go to this mom to get any medical treatment and it's not really correct and she knows it's not legal but the dad still kind of pushes that on her because like they don't have much of an option since they're so cut off and they refuse to like call an ambulance or anything and then it flips back on her in the car accident where now
Mhm.
she's got like a head trauma and she's got like the raccoon eyes and everything and she's completely just altered for the rest of her life.
Great point.
I
I
think
also
also.
noticed.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
You can go.
I was just gonna say how they like used it as like a fear tactic, and like they would scare her, and they're like, if you go to college, like it's like not God's plan for you, and He's not gonna love you and stuff like that. And then she was scared to do all these things because she was scared that she was like gonna go to hell if she did follow through with these things. Like her dad would scare her so bad using religion.
And that's why I thought it was so interesting, like how the mom kind of progressed throughout the story, because in the beginning it definitely seemed like she had less extreme views than the dad. And it seemed like she kind of wanted Tara to like go off and be her own person, but like as it went on, I think like for her and like all of the family members that kind of cut Tara off, it was like easier for them to just like use religion as a scapegoat instead of like coming to terms with like maybe their own trauma and using it as a way to blame Tara for something that was not her fault at all.
I always
I feel
had a
like
hard
they're like,
time.
oh, sorry. You go.
I had a hard time like understanding if like what side the mom was on because like sometimes I felt like she was almost like forced into this life and she couldn't escape it, so she just went with it, but she wanted her kids to have a better life. But then other times she would side with like her husband and go with his beliefs and then like also force her kids to do that. So it was very wishy-washy with her.
I think she started to just dissociate. I, at a certain point through so much trauma, I think she just kind of gave up. And then the success that she was finding with the essential oils, that became a part of their narrative, their story. And obviously, that is kind of a light at the end of her tunnel, so to speak. So it's hard to not try to, separate yourself from that and actually be an advocate for your kid.
Well, and a huge part of their financial security came from that as well. As infuriating that is for the dad and the males in the family, that was very important to them.
I don't know if anybody's ever read The Glass Castle before, but this book was very similar to that. And I think we see the same kind of theme with the mother in The Glass Castle as well. She's very passive, I think. And I think it really stems from like we see it with Emily in this book too. Like she is getting the brunt force of it in a home alone with an abusive person. And we see it with Tara, she becomes a little bit more passive and when she's home, especially with Sean, like she thinks, she did something to initiate the attack. So I think you just see that they kind of dissociate from the issue. And if they can kind of spin it in their mind that this isn't real or they're not actually like this, and it makes it easier for them.
Yeah, and also like it's sort of the herd mentality, she's completely outnumbered, surrounded by mostly wolves or just, members of the family who have been defeated by the more powerful members of the family, so to speak. So, yeah, it was kind of the life that and I don't want to say like she chose it, but she's the wife there in the situation, and she probably doesn't feel very encouraged to try to separate herself from all of that. Very alone.
Yeah, and I found it crazy how when um Tara and Audrey both like realized that Sean was abusive to both of them and they wanted to come forward, how Tara went back to Cambridge and she thought her mother had taken like care of it, I guess, and then later realized that her mother lied and actually they didn't get Sean any help or prevent him from being violent towards Emily or anyone else, and they just wouldn't believe her. And that kind of like definitely drove her away, and she really thought she was going insane because she didn't believe what she like had seen or her memories and relied on others to tell her what actually happened, which was kind of insane.
If anybody else wants to talk about religion, that actually leads us really well into the next discussion topic. Did anyone else want to add anything else about maybe religious trauma, or we're good to move on? Awesome. You guys are doing a really nice job. I'm really enjoying hearing your thoughts. So that leads me into memory, which is exactly what Olivia had just mentioned. So multiple people remembering the same event differently. What is the child's responsibility? And even in this, what's the mother's responsibility? And then how does familial loyalty factor in? The difficult thing is essentially everyone in this family, I would say, besides the father, is experiencing some type of neglect or abuse. Even Sean, as a child, obviously growing up with the father and living in the same house, although the things that he did were not excusable, he also was living in the same cyclical, abusive, neglect, very isolated lifestyle, especially for the younger children, and I would say the mother as well. We can't just say, well, the mother should have done this. The mother, I mean, it's very clear that the mother was experiencing the same level of abuse, maybe not as descriptive, just because again, this is from Tara's perspective, and so I'm sure there's many things that Tara herself didn't know what was occurring, but we can assume with what we know about the rest of the people in her family that that was occurring. So again, just thinking about how can so many people in her family, so many times it's happened in the story where she would bring up an event and people would act like that didn't happen or it was different or, oh my gosh, like you said, we've already got it handled, don't worry about it. What is the child's responsibility when going through difficult situations like that? Do they have a responsibility at all? And then also thinking about her journey and trying to remain loyal and trying to love her family, but also kind of having to eventually choose herself. Kind of when does she cross that line? And anything else that you'd potentially want to chat about that topic? Because I think that this is a really big idea. Another great thing that you could talk a little bit in your reflection paper about is just what is the child's responsibility in a place like this, and what interventions could have been put in place to help her. And just kind of the idea of memory and how we remember things is very interesting to me.
I think what really influenced how Tara would remember things was how earlier in the book she would talk about when like traumatic things would happen to her, specifically when like Sean would abuse her. Like she would tell herself, like it doesn't hurt, like I'm actually fine, to like distract herself from it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think trying to convince herself that influenced how she would remember it. And then if other people in the family had their own methods of comforting themselves through traumatic things, that caused their memories to be different also.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of like what she said with like her memories and like just trying to forget them, like for her to like write this book, I feel like she got a lot of it from her journal entries because she even mentions in the book how like she didn't remember that like conversation or that thing happened, and the
Mm-hmm.
only real evidence she had of it was like a journal entry she had written.
I think with
Yeah,
the journals is sorry.
agreed. I
I
was
was
just
gonna
gonna
say
say I agree. Go ahead.
I think with the journals as well, she even says like I can't even remember the instance, but at one point she said she wrote it down exactly as it happened. Um, which implies that like before she would like write things like very elusive and
Mm-hmm.
suggest that what happened, but not give the exact account. And when you write things down, it reinforces it in your memory, and it was being reinforced and just not a truthful light to what actually happened, what she experienced and felt.
I think a lot of the journal entries when she wasn't writing exactly how she felt or what happened was mostly just due to how the rest of the family reacted to the situations. I think they played it down a lot. And so she kind of disassociated or disattached from it actually happening or occurring that way. Like, no, that can't be right because this is crazy. Like, no one's reacting like that. So I think a lot of that came from there. And I think that stemmed through the rest of the family's memories as well.
It's a great point.
I really agree with that point, at least because it's like when you have so many other people telling you like, oh, the way you're talking about something or the way you're remembering something, that's not real, that didn't happen, like you're dramatizing it, all of those things, like that really kind of instills like doubt in what you feel happened versus what everybody else is telling you happened. And I think that's almost like the common theme for everything in the book because everybody else is like dismissing or explaining all of these things that happened to her, like, oh, it's God's will, it's all these other things. And she's just stuck dealing with the emotional, like, trauma and effects that she has from it versus like everybody kind of scrambling with her brain, telling her, like, no, that's not real, like that didn't happen that way.
Yeah. I think again, it like, and I keep saying that cyclical idea, but if there's not intervention, the trauma is going to continue to persist cycle after cycle, generation across generation. And so many things we can make assumptions that their past households looked very similar to the household that we learned about. And again, that idea of loyalty within the family, even in an abusive and a neglectful situation, because that's all you know. That isolation is such a huge thing in this novel. They're so isolated from community institutions, other people that could help, any type of intervention or support. And so you're going to trust the people that you're around, even if they're harming you.
Yeah, and I guess another thing too is with everyone having a different story, a different narrative is another way to not have to be accountable for what's
Mm,
happening. And then as far as, finding the truth in that, how do you do that in that kind of a family situation where everybody has their own version of the story, but here you have a victim or multiple victims that, are just being downplayed? How do you take the truth and hold anybody accountable?
Yeah, and even in like the notes at the end of some of the chapters that she wrote, like she said that oh, when she asked like her brothers what had happened, they had different stories than what she recalled, and it was just like, oh, like what was the actual like truth of what happened.
I will say when you are writing your paper, if you're choosing to talk about this, like one important thing from the child welfare perspective is we always believe the child. Even if like very, very recently I had a new student brought into my class, and the student is a compulsive liar. It is written in their IEP. Their main educational goal is not to be consistently lying. And this student discussed some trauma and potential abuse that was happening at home. And even though I have all of this paperwork that talks about how the student blatantly lies, my main number one job is still to file a Child Protective Services report, because you don't want to be on the other side of that ever, where even that child that blatantly lies all the time, if that's the one time that they're opening up and telling the truth, we always have to believe the child. And so if you choose to write about memory, that'd be a great additional connection that you can make with some supporting information, just about how we have to do what we can to protect the child, because whatever voice they're using to voice their possible concerns or understanding of what might be an issue in their life, we have to take that into consideration. We have to validate that. And then hopefully everything comes out fine. And that's not actually the case, but we always have to believe the child. We always have to take that a step further and put that into the correct processes so that we can ensure that if they have to have a safer environment, then they can find that. That's a great like content specific connection that you could make there. I think we'll go ahead and just look at our last slide here. We looked at religious trauma. Oh, that was our last slide. Let's just talk about one last thing. My last question, and this would be a great way to end our discussion this evening. Do you think Tara could have been helped earlier in her life or encouraged early in her life, that maybe would have eased some of the difficulties that she had, or potentially gotten her out of some difficult situations? And maybe
One
I
thing that
what could that have looked like? Sorry.
sorry. One thing that I was thinking is if she was able to go to school, I think she could have gotten some help, because I feel like for a lot of kids who are abused, school is their safe place, and they can get like somebody might notice that they're being abused if they see bruises or just the way that they're talking or acting, and they might be able to get them some help earlier on. But since her parents didn't allow her to go to school, that was kind of hard for her.
Yeah, I
That's
always
what
kind of
I was
wonder.
gonna say also.
Sorry.
I think I wrote this down when I came across it. When she finally filed for like having a birth certificate and documentation, I think that would have been a great time for like CPS to intervene and visit and try to figure out why she didn't have any documentation. And maybe it could have been a fluke, but I think a lot of the time that would reveal some just bad things that are happening inside a home.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there were a lot of circumstances where like it was a very like suspicious like situation, and just like no one really ever did anything. Like the amount of children like that like from there was 7 of them, and like they like most of them had delayed birth certificates, and that never raised any flags. Or like when they actually were like the police came and they were like, why isn't anything insured, and like asking all these questions, but then like nothing really came out of it. And even like the other like even like Charles, like he was just a kid, but like he understood like something wasn't right, but just like the families like around them at church like never really did anything, even though they knew they were like definitely not putting their kids in school and everything.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with like Charles's stuff, and I think that even if she had gone to school, at least like starting from high school, then she could have gotten some help early, and that was kind of like around when her and Charles were like getting closer, and I feel like although yeah, he was also a kid, I feel like he definitely could have maybe done a little bit more, because he was definitely concerned for her, especially I think after witnessing what Sean did to her during like that Thanksgiving dinner. I feel like if he had like maybe some bravery and like reported it, then it could have gotten her help a lot sooner.
I kind
I
of
found
wonder
it
why.
interesting. Oh, sorry.
I wonder why. I think it's the mom's parents, the like grandparents uptown, I think is what she calls them.
Mm-hmm.
Why they didn't step in a little more, because they were a little more like familiar with the outside world, and like it seems like the mom had a pretty decent upbringing. It was just the dad that brought her into like that hole that she couldn't get out of. I wonder why those grandparents didn't like intervene at basically any point.
Mm-hmm.
I found it interesting how they knew so many people, but yet no one raised any suspicion on why their kids weren't in school. Like they were obviously working jobs, but no one asked like, why aren't you in school? And then especially when she went to go to college, how she was able to get away without any record of being in any sort of public school system.
I think I'll just leave us with one last kind of supporting content aspect, just in case if you're looking for one more thing to kind of support your information. A very typical cycle that we see is escalation, denial, and then the victim is self-blaming. We see this throughout this novel many times, where a situation becomes difficult, the abuse occurs, or severe neglect occurs. Denial of the situation. Denial is a huge topic throughout this novel. And then usually it leads back to then the victim finding reasons as to why that happened to them and what they did to deserve that. That's a very common cycle when we look at abuse, specifically in child welfare cases. So again, that's escalation, denial, and then the victim is self-blaming. It'd be another great content supplement there. I think we're good. I feel like we've talked about a lot of stuff that will be able to really help you with this assessment. Sorry, my brain is like so on teacher mode. Assignment. I thoroughly enjoyed tonight. I am so thankful that you guys were able to come. I know that Zoom or Teams is so